Hey y'all, guess what? 5:35 and I am on time. So, this is going to be a good one. I'm not stressing. I'm really stressing. Welcome to my very first prime time live. I don't usually come out during the daylight. So, that's when all the real people are out, the ones that really know what they're doing. So, thank y'all for being here. And this one is going to be sort of along the serious part of this, and I'm not usually a serious person, but one of the things that I know that for 2 days, for 2 nights, I've been discussing back and forth and, pretty much bouncing ball going over here and bouncing ball going over there, but it's come down to discussing DNA and IgG. Well, I'm going to play a 5-minute clip of a creator. And this is in no kind of way a dig at this creator. It's no kind of way of disrespect to this creator. It is something that I want to acknowledge and see if I can clarify it a little bit. Birdie is the creator, and I think his guest is Devil's Advocate. This is in no kind of way a dig towards them or anything like that. It's just that some things are said, and I would like to take the opportunity to maybe clarify it. And I'm not going to say any kind of misinformation or disinformation because sometimes things happen and sometimes it's what they think or it's what they've been told or anything. These are very knowledgeable creators. They're pleasant, they're nice. I don't know them, they don't know me. So this is in no kind of way a witch hunt or anything like that. Not your typical Nina being the YouTube police. So um okay, I guess we need to start with Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee's songs. So we are gonna remember the four, and that's the reason that we are here. So these are my words, but as you can tell when you hear the song, definitely not my voice.
Truth destroyed. Clickbait, vulture circling, feasting on the pain. YouTube's the cesspool, drowning truth in the rain. Guilt is versus burgers, pick your poison, take a shot. You're ripping friends apart while the victims rot. Cold burgers, face on every screen, a villain or a pawn. He's screaming in the comments, but the heart's long gone. Monetize the bloodshed, stack that ad cash high. While Maddie's dreams and Kaylee's life just wither up and die. Burn it down, this toxic flow. You're selling out their souls for a viral show. Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, lost in your disgrace. We're choking on your bullshit, spitting shame in your face. Graveyard glow, you're killing their lives. Forgotten in the static of your endless fights. Armchair detectives, yeah, you're playing CSI. Spewing half-baked theories while their families cry. Coburger's guilty, eyes framed. You love the fucking game. But Xana smiling, Ethan's heart ain't fuel for your thing. You're dropping hashtags, chasing clout. It's a digital disease, turning tragedy to content, bringing justice to its knees. We're sick of your obsession, your drama's a disgrace. You're dancing on their graves, got their blood on your face. Burn it down, this toxic flow. You're selling out their souls for a viral show. Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, lost in your disgrace. We're choking on your bullshit, spitting shame in your face. Graveyard glow, you're killing their lives. Forgotten in the static of your endless fight.
And let us not ever forget that they are the reason that we are here. So I chose to end it with the silence because it had Maddie and Jake together, and Kaylee and Jack D together, and Xana and Ethan together. And I wanted to do that in silence. So that is the reason that we are here, and that's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today, because we all have a responsibility to do research, and we can't just come out and put anything out there that we want to put out there without doing our own research. Because if Chloe, for instance, love you, Chloe, if Chloe tells me something and I don't confirm, verify, question, believe me, I tell Chloe something, she's like, can you give me a receipt, Nina? You know, but that's us being accountable, because if I go out and repeat that, I'm just as guilty as she is. So, and as I said, I'm going to play this, and this is in no disrespect to anybody, and I'll put Birdie's channel in there, and I'll put Devil's Advocate in there. The female attorney, I don't have a clue. So, hello to her. So, here we go.
We just have to get that guy. Like, the ends justify the means. The ends never justify the means when it comes to skirting due process or eroding people's rights, because it is such, I hate to use the cliche legal term, slippery slope, but once you do it, you never stop. And once you allow a prosecutor, and their feet are not held to the fire, once they are allowed to do that, and once judges continue to allow them to do shady shit like that, it never stops. And the next person is not going to get the benefit of full due process. So I think that's dangerous. So I couldn't let that go, because you made such a good point there. But in terms of how DNA is collected, Lee and I were talking about this earlier. And I understand the judge has made a ruling, and I hope that that's been properly preserved for appeal. But they cannot go around probable cause and then not disclose how they got the sample to match, to do the comparison, to the defense. Because my understanding is they have not disclosed that information to the defense. In fact, they don't want to, and they've refused to. And I would love to get my hands on a transcript if I can. I don't know how the judge allowed that to stand, because you cannot go around the normal method for obtaining a search warrant, to do investigation, to get to DNA by circumventing the normal processes. And that's what it sounds like. And again, without knowing a whole lot about what happened, it sounds like that's what they did. So I'm very curious to see how that issue would come up on appeal.
Let me clarify that a little bit. I did actually send, I don't know if we want to pull it up or not, but I did actually send Birdie a couple of screenshots from Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes Falling, and it has a paragraph or two about what they did. And let me summarize it. Again, if you want to put it up, Birdie, great. If you don't, well, I'll just speak to it. But what the tricky part they did is, so the Moscow PD couldn't come up with a lead in the case for almost a month, and the feds were involved from day one. And the feds started looking into Brian Kohberger, and they weren't telling the Moscow PD that they knew about Brian Kohberger, or they suspected Brian Kohberger. Go back to the page before that, the one that's all blue mostly. There you go. So this right here in this paragraph where it says why, one theory had it that the Bureau was simply being cautious. IgG determination was not a sort of evidence. Let me just summarize this first. If you want to read along, you can. But what the basic idea was,
and y'all, I do not have this sped up. That is how fast that guy talks. I mean, okay.
The idea was that the feds basically said so Othram Labs put something into CODIS, couldn't find a hit because, well, Brian Kohberger doesn't have any criminal background, so he's not in CODIS, right? So FBI asked us to take over Othram Labs' sample, and they doubled the size. They did some kind of manipulation where they basically take the sample and they keep replicating it.
Sorry, I wasn't going to do that. Number one, right off the bat. Oh, okay. First of all, Othram did not run it through CODIS. Idaho State Forensic Lab ran it through CODIS. Othram did not run it through CODIS. Okay. When there was nobody came back on CODIS, FBI chose to, well, Idaho and FBI in Moscow, whoever made the decisions, they made the decision to go the IgG direction. Okay. Now keep in mind that the only way you can graduate to the IgG is to put it through CODIS first. So we have a sheath at the crime scene. Bag it, tag it, get it to the forensics lab. And, you have all your X's and T's and I's and everything crossed and dotted, and, chain of custody is solid. Gets to the lab. Look, y'all, Idaho State Forensics Lab is number 13 in the world. This is not a shoddy lab, y'all. You don't get to be number 13 in the world by being a shoddy lab, okay? They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. Okay, so they swab it. They run it through CODIS, nothing. So we're all caught up. It gets sent to Othram. The reason it gets sent to Othram is because there is not a law enforcement facility anywhere in the United States that has capability to take a STR, which is a single tandem repeat, and build an SNP, which is that nucleoid morphism or whatever, polymorphism. Yeah, that word. SNP, we'll call it a SNP. But it's okay because I've got CC Moore coming up. She's going to explain all this to y'all. So hang on.
Replicating until they get a big enough sample size. They eventually used that to get to 4 family members whose all last names didn't match Kohberger, and somehow through genetic trees they ended up getting to maybe it's the family in Pennsylvania somewhere that might be related, and then they went for a trash pull on the family and got his dad's DNA from the trash and said, well, the biological material of his dad is 99 point some ridiculous ass number likely to be the father of the suspect in the Idaho 4 murders, and so therefore that puts Brian Kohberger at the scene. That's kind of how they went there. But as far as the probable cause affidavit, here's where it gets tricky. So the feds gave the name Brian Kohberger to Moscow PD, knowing that and this is my analysis, knowing that they couldn't use the IgG information, it was sketchy in the first place, and basically said, now that you know the name, start digging into this guy. And then Moscow PD said, oh,
Negative, Ghost Ranger, negative, 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 negative. Negative. Okay.
oh, you know what? There's a guy in Pullman who drives a white Elantra, and he happened to be out driving that night. So we're looking into this guy, and they kind of made it that way. And so then they used all that data, his driving records, his cell phone pings, and basically ignored the IgG information in the probable cause affidavit. So it technically didn't really end up, I don't think, in strong language in the IgG. But the tricky part is, I'll get off the mic so you can comment on all this, is that the prosecution wants to use the DNA evidence in trial to say, we've got Brian Kohberger at the scene because of, and it's a nanogram sized piece. It's an invisible sized piece of DNA on the button snap of the knife. But anyways, they want to use it in trial to say they got there, and they have not disclosed in discovery to the defense how they developed.
No, negative, negative. It is, I think in the court documents, I think it is described as a robust sample. Okay. Now, what they are also failing to tell Miss Lawyer up there is that it is single source. Okay. So that means one person touched it. One person held it. One person unsnapped that snap. That's what single source means. Okay. Touch DNA. I tell you, like I told everybody the last 3 days, if I want drugs, I'll go to my plug. Plug will go and get my drugs. That is a middleman. Okay. You take the middleman out, that's touch DNA. There's no middleman. And that's just as elementary and true life as I know how to put it. And I'm a recovering addict, so I can relate to that.
That sample. And so this is a big issue. And the judge had said he's supporting that the prosecution doesn't have to tell the defense how they got that sample. And yet they want to present it to the jury. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, that's wild. And this is trace DNA, right? This isn't even like real DNA. Sorry, right. I freaking hate trace.
Negative again. Oh my gosh. Birdie, devil's advocate. Every bit of this is with total respect and total just me being accountable and being transparent. Nothing towards you, nothing towards your channel, no disrespect, no anything. But y'all really need to do some research, guys. Love y'all, but y'all really need to do some research.
Trace DNA. It's such nonsense.
Yeah, and it was
again,
found. Go ahead, Devils.
Sorry. Well, again, this is the argument, right? So they called it touch DNA, and I think you and I talked about this. That in the industry, they call touch and trace DNA kind of synonymously. They use the term touch, which implies to any juror that you literally touched it, when it could have been a piece of skin cell floated through the air and landed on it, right?
That's why.
Okay, what Chloe and Phoenix, I want to say amen to that, and I think that is one of the reasons that I did it, was because I honestly feel like that maybe she was up there and made a judgment based on their information. Hey, if I went by their information, I'd be saying the same thing that she says. I mean, so I think I sort of felt like it was only fair to her. And I mean, she probably will never see my video. I mean, I'm a very, 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 very small and new creator. So, and I'm good with that. I did it more for my own accountability and because I know it's the right thing to do and I'm doing it for the right reason. So if they strike me, I'll take the strike. If they come back and retaliate with nastiness, I'll take that too. But I feel like I did the right thing. Hey, 12. So, yeah, I mean, if I felt like I owed it to her. So
that's why they call it that. It is inherently prejudicial because.
So apparently she says that that's the reason they call it touch DNA, is because they want it to come across to the jury as you touched it. No, the reason that it's called touch DNA is because, but wait a minute, let me rephrase that. Single source male touch DNA. Okay. Big difference between what they're talking about. And Lord, I don't even know if I can keep up with that narrative. So I'm not even going to try to repeat it because I don't think I could repeat it because I was sort of kind of lost. And Chloe, to answer your question about why did the way Nina just said that sounded like the beginning of church after the song. Let us pray. Hey, Texas. Well, I mean, and I'm not mad. I'm not upset. I'm not. I think I'm more. I'll put it to you this way. And look, I've got 17 people in here. The 17 people I have in here mean everything to me because I know most of y'all, like not personally because we've never met in person, but you know what I'm saying. But in that live, they had 1,100 people listening. 1,100 people in one live. That's not counting replay crew. So I feel like that if we see something like that, that is so egregious and so just, look, y'all know how I feel about Pavioli. Yeah, Pavioli, that's my pet name to you. Pavioli's a good storyteller, okay? And he has a lot of subs and he has a lot of people that listen to him. But in the long run, I think Pavioli knows that he's a storyteller. Not a storyteller like a liar, like a wordsmith, word salad, wordsmith. He feeds the rabbits and stuff, And so I'm even good with Pavioli, okay? But stuff like this to where it looks like, oh my gosh, it looks like the most shoddiest thing ever. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of mistakes made in this investigation, okay? But you got to consider you have a police force that these guys think the worst thing they might ever do is maybe give a drunk walking ticket or, something like that. They never imagine that they're going to walk into a house one day for a quadruple murder and know how to handle it. I mean, so there's going to be mistakes. And I don't think that they were nefarious mistakes. I don't think they were intentional trying to set somebody up or anything like that. And this live right now is not about guilt or innocence. It's about correct information. And it's information that I can back up 100%. I mean, court documents, everything. So, let me see if I've missed anybody. And I know this is not typical of my lives, but we got to do what we got to do. Have I missed anybody? Oh my gosh, there's a yellow. What is that? Is that an apple or a lemon? Nina, these people are ignorant. DNA amplification is part. Oh, you saw that one too. See, I didn't even add that one. So this one right here, I'm going to put it up here. If you'll notice, GM is talking about DNA amplification, right? What it is in one of their lives, I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before, they're talking about the state's expert witness, how they took the STR mix and they amplified it and went against all these codes and standards and everything. And like GM, I'm sitting there going, you're calling them out for amplifying the sample? That's what happens. And so then Birdie looks up to see how many cases have been that the STR has been used. And I'm like, dude, the STR is used in the labs to do this. I mean, so I sometimes ignorant is bliss, and he was very blissful. So, and that's not being ugly. Maybe he doesn't know. He's welcome to come on here. And look, I have nothing against anybody. So, yes, those amplifying bastards. That's right. So, jog my memory. How did the FBI? Okay, all I know that I can say for certainty is that when the Idaho State Police, no, Forensics Lab, which is number 13 in the world, ran it through CODIS and they didn't get a hit, then I don't know. No, well, as a matter of fact, I'm not even going, FBI did not do it because I don't know if they flew, rode in a truck, a bus, or a donkey. But a law enforcement officer from Moscow PD and the lab person from Idaho State Lab, which is number 13 in the world, they hand delivered the sample to Othram in Texas. Okay. Now, I don't care how much you don't like law enforcement, how much you think this or think that. Okay. Chain of custody is solid. It has never left anybody's hands chain of custody is 100% solid. Okay. So let's see what we got. So does that answer your question, Chloe? Because once I thought about it, I don't know if FBI suggested it and that's what they decided or if it was on their own. But I do know that Moscow Police Department and Idaho State Forensics person delivered it. Now, please keep in mind that you go from the skin cells and you extract the DNA and then you make a short tandem repeat, something like that, an STR. And then that gets sent to Othram and they build a SNP. Now, what happens, I'll let CC explain it to you. So, look, we'll go see CC.
Why not just produce
No,
that? Why not just produce the tree, show people how you got there? Why would you not show your work?
Because we need to protect the privacy of the matches and their extended families. They have not done anything wrong, and they shouldn't be pulled into a trial, and certainly not a high-profile trial like this. So if the court in the Koberger case follows already established precedent, then they will rule that those are not discoverable because they are not evidence. They are not going to be used against the suspect in a court of law. They are not the reason that he was arrested. That DNA match to his father and then the swab they took directly from him are the reason he is being charged with this crime. And so none of what I do or any other genetic genealogist is going to be used against that suspect in any way. It's just a tip. Like I said, it's like if someone called into Crime Stoppers. And so the reason that the prosecutors and DAs have fought so hard to protect the privacy of those matches is because if those identities were to come out, it would be much less likely that anyone would want to upload to GEDmatch and opt in to this type of matching. It could really have an incredibly chilling effect on this amazing tool and being able to help solve these cases and get violent criminals off the streets. And so there's a judge in California that ruled they were basically confidential genetic informants, that they needed their identities protected in the same way that a confidential informant would. So say that someone was charged with a crime like this and they somehow got off and they were actually guilty. Maybe a technicality or some other reason. Maybe the prosecution didn't put on a good case. And then they knew exactly which of their relatives were the ones that were partially responsible for their identification. That doesn't seem like a very good situation, does it? Who would want that? Precedent and the case law has been consistent. All of the judges have ruled in the same way so far. That's not to say that could never change, but there's much more precedent and case law out there than most people realize. These cases have been mostly quietly working their way through the courts. Most of them are not going to ever get the kind of attention that the Idaho case is getting. And so I think most people just aren't aware that judges have weighed in on this. And what that has meant is that even though I've been on hold for dozens and dozens of jury trials to testify, I've been canceled every single time. And I've never ended up testifying in front of a jury. Now, I have testified in pretrial hearings so the judge could make a decision, a determination on these questions. I've testified in grand jury hearings, but never in open court in front of a jury hearing a case like this. We don't expect that that's going to change, but you never know. Of course, any judge can make a different ruling, but so far, this is what we're seeing, and we're seeing it repeatedly over and over and over, these same types of decisions.
So what about this argument that if law enforcement never has to show how it reached its conclusion, how do we know that law enforcement didn't just go on the sites that it wasn't supposed to and search there and go ahead and get the data there and just say, yep, we found it, now we confirmed it, but having violated the process?
So that's a great question. Well, there have been no laws that meant they had to follow terms of service. So even if they did do that, it wasn't illegal and it wouldn't get anyone off because it's not fruit of a poison tree if it's not illegal. Law enforcement's argument is that they can do anything the public can do. So if a public can access a database, then law enforcement should be able to access that database. And that's been upheld in lots of case law and other applications. And so that is why we need laws that make it illegal to use databases that are not consented for this purpose. And so a handful of states have passed those now. I worked very closely on the Utah law, and we enshrined those terms of service into law. If you were to do that in Utah now, it actually would be a problem. Now, it is written into the law that it wouldn't get somebody off still, though. So it's something that could be, that they would, be punished for, but not get a defendant off if that happened.
Whoops, sorry, I was answering Chloe in the comments. Okay, so with all that being said, okay, so that part addresses the whole why it's so hard to get prosecution and law enforcement to turn over everything as far as the IGG is concerned. Now, okay, so I know y'all remember back in like October, I think, um, Judge made the ruling that that prosecution had to turn over everything in camera to him. Everything. Okay. The only thing that they could not turn over to anybody was the snip. The reason they cannot turn the snip over is because it's only in a portal. And the next video is going to demonstrate exactly what was given to the FBI from Othram's lab. Okay. So they didn't run around with skin cells, and all that. No, it's analytical now. It's a file now. Okay. It No biological, no nothing. It is analytical, computer, machine, robots, everything. Okay. And so they can't touch it, they can't manipulate it, they can't add to it and double its size. They can't do anything to it except read off of it, get names and information, and then go do what they do. Now, Chloe, you asked why. You said you were confused how it went from Othram to the FBI. Okay. I can only upload 5 videos at a time, but I do have like a 49-second video from the guy from Othram. And he is explaining, how they do some things and stuff, like how they do it and everything. Well, probably around the end of the video, he talks about there's different ways that you can contract with Othram, that you can contract from beginning all the way to the end and them give you your family tree. Or you can contract, build the snip, and we turn it back over to you. Okay. The FBI in 2022, I think the FBI had 22 million DNA samples in their database. And what people don't realize is for 5 years, in about 2017, the FBI was already training agents because they have their own genetic genealogical lab in California. Uh, oh my gosh, everybody knows the one in Virginia. Where all the FBI goes? I can't believe I went blank on that. But anyway, they have one there, and then they have a huge one in Florida. So the FBI is totally trained and qualified to do all of the family tree. Okay. But once they get a defendant in the defendant chair, according to DOJ guidelines, and don't laugh at the guidelines because I know what everybody's going to say. They went against their own guidelines. I got an answer for that too, and it comes from CC Moore. So, but anyway, it says that once you have a defendant, the S&P goes back to Othram or whoever and gets destroyed. Okay. So they can't produce it. And that's the reason that Bill Thompson made the statement, I can't produce what I don't have. And everybody wants to make that such a big statement. No, it's an absolute fact. He can't produce it because they don't have it. Now, they turned over the family tree, they turned over their notes, they turned over their scribbles and everything, And then Judge in January told prosecution everything they had to turn over, and they abided by that. Ann Taylor comes back and puts in a motion because she wants the rest of her team, I understand that, to be able to see the IGG and how they got there. It gets approved. Ann Taylor comes back, puts in another motion because she now wants her investigators to be able to see it. Gets approved. They approve for the experts to see it. There's nothing hidden. The only thing missing is the original S&P. Now, could they get it back? I guess they could if they want to upload another one, but I don't know. I mean, now, where a lot of the confusion is coming from is you heard them say that they want to hide how they got it, and they don't want to tell how they found Koberger and all this, but that they want to use it in court. No, it is only a tip. It's just like if you call Crime Stoppers, okay? It cannot be used at all. And so where the confusion comes in is when they talk about bringing the DNA up in court because his DNA was on the sheath. That's the DNA. That's not the IgG. They're totally separate, totally different, 1000% different. The IgG cannot go to court because it doesn't prove anything. This is not proven science. CC Moore is not an expert. As much of an expert as she is, if they tried to call her as an expert, they couldn't. They could on like maybe the genetics of on the health side of it and stuff like that. But as far as the forensics, they cannot call her as an expert because it is not a proven science. It's not valid. And I hate to put it like that, but it's not. I mean, they're just going through and building a family tree. It's not science. So, have I missed anything? LE can show receipts? Yes. Kind of like showing your work in math? Yes. FBI does what they want. Idaho is lucky they got whatever. Yes, 100%. FBI did not have to turn over anything. They could have let the state die on that sword. They didn't have to do a dang thing. Because, I don't know if you read my comment to Chloe, a confidential genetic informant is protected by the Department of Justice, just like a confidential informant. I have a video and it's talking about the confidential informant because for so long, that's all you heard. And I was like, y'all are going to be disappointed because when we come to trial, nobody's going to sling those double doors open and here comes a confidential informant and have a Perry Mason moment. Your confidential informant is a file that's in a SNP that is analytical. That's it. That's your confidential informant. Okay. Now, is there someone that maybe called the tip line? Maybe. Is there, but that's not an informant. That's just someone giving information. In order to be an informant, you have to be getting something out of it. Now, if you're just calling the tip line and you're okay, say I was say I showed up at 11:22 after they've called 911. I don't know anything about it, but I was there and I can just tell you what I heard while I was there. That doesn't make me an informant. That just means that I gave them some information. Okay? There's a big difference. Okay, this is so true. The words in the song. Aw, thank you. I think this is the same way. Yes, it absolutely is. But I will tell you this. In the Golden State, in D'Angelo's case, law enforcement did backdoor because they didn't even let them know that they were law enforcement. At least FBI and them. And the thing about it is what you need to realize is you have, like GEDmatch and then you have GEDmatch Pro. Okay. GEDmatch is available for law enforcement or GEDmatch Pro, whichever one, but there's two sides to it. Right side, I'll say, is law enforcement. Left side is no, no, no. Okay. But legally, they can do that because they accept SNPs, where somebody like 23andMe you have to spit in that tube. So that's the big difference. And my phone just blacked out. So anyway, that's the difference, is like with 23andMe and stuff like that, it has to be that pristine biological sample that you spit in the tube. With GEDmatch and others like that, they accept the SNPs and stuff. And so it sort of opens them up to more terms of service invasion, I guess would be the word. But because it's not illegal, there's no fruit of the poisonous tree. Do I wish that they could have gotten Coburger without doing terms of service, going against terms of service? Yes, I do. Just because of the way that it looks to the public and puts that bad taste, and it gives people that narrative to run with. So, and I hope I'm not boring y'all to death. And okie dokie, where we at? Warning label Nina. So the original S&P is missing because it was destroyed. Okay, yes, it was destroyed, but that is per Department of Justice rules and guidelines. From that the interim guidelines were written in 2019 to give guidelines because there was nothing out there. Okay, there was no kind of oversight or anything. And so to give oversight, the Department of Justice and everybody got together and they wrote the interim guidelines for DOJ. And it says that once they have a defendant, the S&P, because I mean, you don't want somebody getting a hold of that. I mean, they destroy it. And I'm not going to say they destroy it. Let me rephrase that, because that's speaking out of my knowledge. It gets taken away from law enforcement. So I don't know if it gets destroyed, if it just goes back to the lab that built the S&P, but they no longer can get hands on it. And they can't get hands on it. They can only look at it. So does that make sense? Okay. More so a concerned citizen rather than, yes. Well, yes. Because see, here's the thing about it is CC talks in one of these videos, it may have been the first one, talking about that, do you really want this person to actually get off and know that you're the one that sent him to prison? Technically, that's not true. Just because your DNA was in that database and it matched, that doesn't mean that you like snitched on him. So I would say yes. An unknowingly an unknowing citizen, because they don't do it on purpose. And another thing that was said, I don't know if it was in this video or the one where they're talking about the amplification or whatever, but they talk about, yes, it was in this one, that it came back to the four brothers, not Coburger. Okay, they weren't, but it wasn't a Coburger. Okay, well, aunt in Las Vegas that came out and told about Coburger not eating food in the pots and pans if it had been cooked, if it had meat in it. Now, let me explain that too, because a lot of people get confused about him being a vegan. He was not a vegan out of the love of animals, okay? He would have killed an animal in a heartbeat, okay? He was a vegan for his own personal health, okay? And I'm not going to get into all that. That'll be another video. So I'm trying to stay right on track with this because this is going to be the hill I die on. Okay. So, hey, Sirius. Hey, Rizzo. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Rizzo, don't trust that Jeff character. Just kidding. Judy says, hey, Sirius. Sirius says, hi, Phoenix. Sirius says, okay. So I'm good. Have I answered everything? Okay, so let's see. We're going to go back and, okay, so this next video is still CC Moore, but what she is going to show you is what they worked from. This is what the FBI worked from. So you can see there's no manipulating, no nothing. As far as the sample doubling in size, okay, bioinformatics imputation sequencing. Okay, that is the technical term or whatever. Think of it like this: the SNP repeats. We're going to say A B C D, A B C D, A B C D. Okay, so they put it through their little machine and all this. And if there's an A missing, it fills it in. If there's a C missing, it fills it in. So it is not increasing in size. It's only getting filled in by what's missing. And since it's repetitive, I think I could figure that out. I don't even have to be one of those robot machines. I could probably figure out A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. I mean, so, okay. I'm going to let you have CC now. I'm going to be quiet.
Long stretches of identical DNA. We're able to use much more distant relatives to.
Sorry, I don't know what I did.
Prove
I messed
who
that up.
is, basically.
Right. So, what happened in the Koberger case pretty much follows the line of what you had said. They started with trying the STR, running it through the CODIS database. They got no hits. And that would typically be someone who is already in the database because they've already been convicted or because DNA has already been gathered from a crime scene. So all that means is that person had never had their DNA gathered from a crime scene and had never been convicted of a crime, so their DNA was not in the database. So then the state moved to exactly what you're talking about. They moved to using the investigative genetic genealogy and trying the SNP method. Now, they had the SNP made at an outside lab. That may not be the right word. Is that what it? What's
right? And that's because, as I mentioned, none of the crime labs yet have the capability to create SNP profiles, so they have to send it to a third-party private lab. That's the only choice right now. I'm sure that will change in the future, where law enforcement will start having their own technology and equipment to do this. But at this point, that hasn't happened yet.
Right. Okay. So do you want to walk us through some of your other slides and kind of talk us through? You now have the case. You have the files that you need. What are you going to do next to try to figure out whose DNA was present at the scene?
So I just want to make a note about the Koberger case. A couple of things. One, I absolutely think the authorities did the right thing, moving immediately to investigative genetic genealogy when they didn't get that hit in CODIS. That is what I've been advocating for, because that's where we can have the biggest impact on public safety and make the most difference. We can potentially save lives and certainly keep these cases from going on for years and decades, like so many of the cases that I've been involved in. But they did send it out to a third-party lab because they had to. But then it came back in-house, meaning the FBI investigative genetic genealogy team are the ones that did the research. So the only part of it that was farmed out to a private lab or to a third party was just that analysis where they took the DNA, created the SNP profile, and then it came back to law enforcement themselves to do the research. And that's not always the case, because I've worked on hundreds of cases as an outsider. But I think that this will start being done increasingly by in-house law enforcement officials. And we've already seen that some with the FBI teams that are working around the country.
Okay. Do you want me to put up the GED map slides? Okay.
So once that file is uploaded to GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA, it's compared against all of the people's files that are in there that have agreed to be compared against law enforcement. So in GEDmatch, if it's a violent criminal case, a suspect case, you have to check a box that says police, and only about a third of the database has done that. So we're comparing against only about 600,000 profiles. All of those profiles are going to come from either Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, or Family Tree DNA, because GEDmatch doesn't do any DNA testing. They're just a third-party DNA repository. So if you've tested anywhere else, you can download your raw data, upload it to GEDmatch, and you can decide if you want to be compared against these types of cases or not. If you don't check the box, then you can be compared against Jane and John Doe's and anyone who has uploaded for genealogical purposes like adoptees or say donor conceived individuals. But to be compared against violent criminals, you have to check that box. So then we get this match list that looks something like this. It'll have a kit number, and then it'll have the person's name. Now they can put whatever name they want in, so it's not always straightforward. You can use an alias like Butterfly 45. You can use initials, which a lot of people do, or a code. You can just use anything you choose. And then there's an email address. And the email address is really key for us trying to identify who that DNA contributor is. And so we will use like reverse email lookup programs to do that. These are all public. I don't have access to anything that's not public record. So I'll use a company like Ben Verified, which is a people search database, enter that email into their database. And then sometimes that will tell me who that belongs to. Next to that is you see GED. So if someone wants to be really helpful, they can upload their family tree information for us. It's called a GEDCOM. And that's what that GED means there. That is someone who is chosen to do that. And that makes our work so much easier because I don't care who you are. All I care about is your tree. And so if you upload your tree information for me, I don't even have to spend time trying to figure out who you are because that's not the important part. It's your ancestors that matter. But as you can see in this example, only one person has done that out of this whole list. And that's typical. Usually we'd have to scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. We might find maybe 5 people that have uploaded their family tree information for us. So the vast majority of the time, we have to build that tree. We have to identify that DNA contributor, figure out who their parents are and grandparents, and then build that tree back in time. It'll also tell us their gender, but that is self-inputted. So occasionally it doesn't match the genetics. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Autosomal DNA right there, it'll tell you how many centimorgans are shared of autosomal DNA, which is the type of DNA that we're testing. Those SNPs are autosomal. Autosomal is inherited from both your parents.
Okay, well, I guess I cut that off. But anyway, her last word is autosomal is inherited by both parents. So you can see that we're not dealing with blood cells. With skin cells. We're not dealing with blood. We're not dealing with anything biological. So for people to think that the FBI or somebody manipulated this or manipulated that, I'm going to say this, okay? Again, Idaho State Forensics Lab is number 13 forensics lab in the world. Not the Northwest, not the United States, not a continent, the world. Okay? Othrum's lab, oh my gosh. If y'all need their, whatever you call it, credentials, believe me, they have some credentials. So I do not see the number 13 in the world lab and Othrum's lab doing anything that could cost them their reputation or anything like that. So maybe I'm naive, but I could just possibly be right. And it's not me being right. They could have just done things the way that it was supposed to be done. Imagine that. So, okay, so we know by now that the FBI went against terms of service and that they did that, and CeCe Moore in April of this year. This is her first interview addressing the FBI going against terms of service.
using those two smallest databases, using those consented databases. And our policy is to stick with just those databases because of the concern that the public could turn against this tool. We don't want to just solve one case and lose out on using those two smallest databases, using those consented databases. And our policy is to stick with just those databases because of the concern that the public could turn against this tool. We don't want to just solve one case and lose out on being able to use this for potentially hundreds of thousands, millions of cases in the future that will be in the benefit of public safety. And so that is the decision that we have followed. And those are the best practices that I have promoted from the very beginning and advocated for. However, the more violent crimes I've been working and seen the incredibly negative impact it has on surviving victims, their families, and society as a whole, I can really see both sides now a lot more than I did when I first started working with law enforcement. You know, I've been doing it almost 8 years now, and you do get so discouraged seeing how many people's lives are destroyed and families are torn apart because of people that are willing to commit these crimes. They cannot use Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, which are the two largest databases, because they don't accept raw data uploads. You have to spit in that tube and mail it in. And that's the only way you're going to get your DNA in that database. When we're dealing with forensic files, that is what's called a SNP data file that is made up of hundreds of thousands of genetic markers. And they're creating these case files for criminal cases in an outside lab. They're not running it through Ancestry or 23andMe. They're not going to accept non-pristine samples. When we spit in that tube, the DNA we're sending in is really high quality, really pristine, and we send in a large amount. And so when we're dealing with these forensic samples, they're often tiny amounts of DNA, touch DNA in this case. You know, we might be dealing with mixtures, contaminated, degraded DNA. So those samples are not pristine enough to make it through the process at 23andMe and Ancestry. Their labs would deny those samples and they would say, oh, you've got to submit a new sample. Well, obviously, if it's a forensic case, there's likely not anything else or any better DNA to submit. But MyHeritage has made the decision to accept uploads, and that makes them vulnerable to law enforcement's use. Now, their terms of service bar it, but what has been explained to me by law enforcement is that they can go anywhere the public can go. So if you and I can upload a raw data file into MyHeritage legally, so can law enforcement. And so it's really not a legal question. And that's what the judge has ruled in line with that. And that's what we're seeing consistently across case law now. This is not the first case where this has been brought up. It's not the first case where a judge has weighed in on this question and made a similar ruling, because legality and companies' own terms of service are not the same thing. And so that is how the FBI is able to legally use that non-consented database, that database that has their own set of terms of service, because the public can use it. And it is case law that law enforcement is allowed to go anywhere that the public is. So it's not a question of legality. I'm not at all surprised the judge ruled the way that he did in this case. It's really more a question of public perception. This is an ethical question, not a legal question. And so the reason I've always argued against using the MyHeritage database or any database that it's against their terms of service and the people haven't been able to make that decision for themselves, whether they want to help law enforcement in this way or not, is that it really could have a chilling effect on this incredible tool that's been doing so much good. This is a tool that fully relies on public support and participation. And so if people get a negative view of investigative genetic genealogy and law enforcement's use of this data, they could pull their data, they could stop DNA testing, and this tool would then not be able to be used for any of the good that we've been able to use it for. I mean, it really is an incredible tool to improve public safety, to get violent criminals off the streets, to stop serial killers and serial rapists from ever becoming that, because we can identify them after the first time. And so I can see that I'm of two minds in this. I really think that we need to follow best practices and be ethical and responsible in this use of this incredible tool that we have built for human identification. But there's also this public safety aspect that we have to weigh. So we always have this tension between public safety and privacy, personal privacy. And we're seeing that in genetic genealogy all the time. Where do you draw that line? We could have a national database where everybody would be required to provide their DNA, and intimate violent crimes would be solved immediately, right? So that would be fantastic for public safety and saving lives. But most of us don't want that. We don't want that much infringement into our personal privacy. But with genetic genealogy, it's not everybody, but it's your cousins, right? If any of your relatives out to second cousins once removed have tested, that can lead to you, and even further out. Once you start getting to third cousins and further out, they're not all going to share DNA with you. But most people, especially people with deep roots in the US, with Northwest European ancestry, can be identified pretty quickly. And so the bigger database you have, the more quickly that can be accomplished. So we saw that in this case where they were trying to identify this very violent individual that left his DNA behind it, or let me say that again. They were trying to identify the person who left his DNA behind at the crime scene, presumably the killer, as quickly as they could, so nobody else would get hurt, so they could stop this person in his tracks. And they were using these two consented databases, these very small databases. I've built Brian Koberger's tree, and it is not the type that would typically have really great matches. So I'm not at all surprised their top match was 70 centimorgans. 70 centimorgans is approximately a third cousin, which means you would share great-great-grandparents. And only one branch of your family tree. We try to connect to both sides of someone's family, to all four of their grandparents if we can, in order to really narrow down the search to just one immediate family, one set of siblings, or one person, if there's just one person of that gender in that family, like in Brian's case. So I expected this would be difficult for them when I built that tree. He's mostly Italian. His last name wouldn't tell you that, but most of his tree is. And those are more recent immigrants to the US. And then he has that one German, fairly recent immigrant line as well. And so for them to just be working in those small databases, they just didn't have enough data to quickly identify him. So they made the decision to upload to MyHeritage, which is not a consented database and it's against their terms of service, and also to upload to the full GEDmatch. So that included the people that were not opted in to law enforcement. And they did that because I'm sure they weighed public safety versus the potential ethical questions of doing that. I can see both sides. Having worked so many violent crimes, I definitely want genetic genealogy to be able to save lives and stop people from ever being victimized and bring answers and justice to families. But I also think it's really important that we protect this tool for the future and we don't turn public opinion against what we're doing and lose the support of the public. We do have to be concerned about public perception. Now, I've been part of a long-term study with academics that have shown that a very high percentage of the public is extremely supportive of what we're doing. And that has also influenced my opinion on this and my approach to this.
Okay. Are y'all bored to death yet? So, a few seconds of dead air. I do apologize. I'll be right back.
Extract out the victim's DNA and are left with just that suspect's DNA. And so it's possible that that could have taken more time, which is possibly why they were focusing on this knife sheath for the affidavit. I imagine
yes, because there they say that was what was found on that button was single source male DNA. So what does that mean? It
means there was just one DNA contributor. So that's a much more straightforward DNA sample than if they have a mixture otherwise, which could be why they focused on that for the affidavit, because it's the most straightforward. Now, that was likely touch DNA, unless he happened to leave a little bit of blood on that, but I would guess it's touch DNA. And that is just a few skin cells, most likely. So that's not very much DNA, and that really illustrates how far technology has come.
Yeah. So what, my feeling as a lawyer in discussing this case is, if I'm the defense, and best case scenario for Brian Kohlberger, that's all the DNA they have of his at the scene. I'm thinking I'm good, because maybe Brian Kohlberger went to the store wherever they sold that knife in the sheath, and he touched it, he picked it up, and it was still left on there. So how long does one's touch DNA last? That'll be relevant.
It will be, and I agree with you. Touch DNA is not the optimal DNA sample that you would want to have in this case. Let's hope maybe it was a drop of blood instead, and I'm wrong about my supposition that it was touch DNA. But I think that the prosecution can argue that if he had handled it, then somebody else would have had to have handled it, and their DNA should also be on there. And you would see a mixture, or you would see.
Bam! Warning label, Nina. Got a bam. There's your bam right there. There would have been a mixture if someone else had touched it. If it was transferred DNA, it would have more than a single source. So, okay. We only got a few more, but I hope this is helping y'all. I mean, because if it's not, I'm going to go get a drink and do something else. No, I'm joking. I'm enjoying this. Okay, so let's see. Let's delete that one. Look at me go. I am learning.
Why not just
No,
produce
why?
that? Why not just produce the tree?
Science. How does it go? What are the vulnerabilities? What do you think?
Well, Chris, really, investigative genetic genealogy and SNP profiles are completely irrelevant to this case. Yes, they may have pointed law enforcement toward Brian, but they are not going to be used against him as evidence of guilt. And therefore, really, these arguments that the defense is bringing out now are not relevant to his case, right? Because they used the SNP profile in the investigative genetic genealogy to point toward him, but it is treated simply as a tip, and they have to collect DNA in order to confirm or refute that hypothesis. And they then will use that STR profile, that traditional genetic evidence that's been accepted in court for decades. That is what will be used against him in a court of law. Genetic genealogy is not used to arrest anyone, charge anyone, or convict them.
They will say, objection, fruit of the poisonous tree. But for them going down this junk science road, they would have never been looking at him in the first place, and now they're just on the trail, and they have an expert
who loves going after genetic genealogy. You are aware of the expert. Are you concerned about their perspective?
I'm not concerned because it's the same arguments that Dr. Larkin has been making for 5 years. She is not a lawyer or a constitutional scholar, neither am I, but I can look at the case precedent that's already been set. I have helped, through my genetic genealogy analysis, identify over 130 living suspects in violent criminal cases, and 60 of those have already worked their way through the courts and ended in a conviction. And that means that we already have seen significant precedent on these very same arguments or very similar arguments. That's not to say this judge couldn't rule differently, but if he follows the case law that's already been established, then it's very unlikely that the defense will be successful with this.
And just to fill in the audience, the reason you bring in that she's not a constitutional expert is because her main avenue of attack is this is an unlawful search and seizure, which is the Fourth Amendment under the Constitution, right? That by going through the family, you're basically backdooring not having a legitimate basis to ask him directly. The counter argument in the case law right now is exactly what you just laid out, which is it's non-dispositive. This is not what takes somebody to prison. It's what starts them on the road to see if they can take them to prison. So we'll see what happens, but you may not be a constitutional expert, but you laid that out perfectly. They find your DNA if you are not in the system through this ancestral DNA thing. How does that work? What needs to be available to find me through the...
If y'all will remember in the video of the two creators that I showed you, they talked about that they had Brian Koberger's name and that they just worked backwards and made everything match him. So that's the reason I'm playing this video.
through these other people?
That's a great question. And so it's very rare that we will find a close family member, and certainly not the suspect, in our genetic genealogy databases. So what we're looking for are people who share what we consider significant amounts of DNA, but it can be less than 1% of their DNA. If you share only 1% of your DNA, then you're likely third cousins with someone, which means you share your great-grandparents. And so we get a whole list of people that share segments of DNA with this unknown person we're trying to identify, and we can reverse engineer their family tree by who they're related to. So the only reason two people would share these significant stretches of DNA across their genome is if they have a common ancestor in their family tree. They have to have inherited that DNA from someone back in that tree. And so hopefully you'll get matches to different lines, their mother's side, their father's side. In some cases, you get all four grandparents' lines. And there's we all have unique family trees except for our full siblings. And so if you're able to put enough of those ancestors back in that tree and piece it together, that's going to narrow it down to just one immediate family. Sometimes you can't get quite that far, so you might have to look at first cousins if you can only get to grandparents. But that's how we do it. We're not using close relatives in most of these cases. It's usually people who won't even know the suspect.
Understood. You still need a name, though. You need somewhere to start. So they have to have something that helps them develop an understanding.
Right. So we
All right.
wouldn't
So
have his
that
name.
is
We would
our
have-
last question, which is right. But the question is, why would you have any name like that had to have some type of other investigative link that we have to figure out from the authorities when they give it to us? Now, the only other question mark, and I'll use this to go into break, there are a lot of questions here, obviously, and that's okay. The authorities deserve confidence after making this arrest, assuming they can make it stick. In his past, is it true that he had a history of drug use? And if so, did he ever have any kind of interchange with authorities or any facilities where they had DNA available? That's something we'll discuss going into the next segment, because as we're developing a picture of who knew him and how they knew him, there are some more aspects to him that may have made him more identifiable. So, Cece, thank you very much. I'll be
Yay. Hey, we all got through that. So, okay. So first of all, is there any questions? And second of all, I hope that it's helped. I know that this part of it is like, because there was so many different stories, and it had too many legs to keep up with, and it was getting really confusing. And the only reason that I understand it is because I'm a researchaholic, you know, and I mean, believe it or not, those bioinformatic imputation papers and stuff, I actually sat and read them and stuff, you know. So, I mean, I feel like, because the DNA, not the IgG facilitated finding him as quick as they found him. Do I believe that it totally, he would have got caught anyway, in my opinion. So, and I mean, but anyway, did it facilitate maybe doing it quicker? Yes, you know. But I hope that this sort of gives y'all maybe a warm and fuzzy that says, you know what, maybe they did do things on the up and up. And like I said, this is not about guilt or innocence. You know, this is about being transparent, accountable, doing research, and saying, you know what, we're responsible for doing the research. And we, you know, number one is the only justice Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan gets is if we have the right person in the defendant's chair. The only justice given to Koberger is if he's the right person in the chair. So, you know, I hope this helped if you're a pro-burger, and I hate pro-burger and guilter, but I think that understanding the steps from the sheath to the portal, I guess you could say, and understanding that uh, the terms of service is not an illegal thing or against the law or anything like that. Yes, it does not look right. It does not make it the fruit of the poisonous tree. It does not make the FBI conniving or scheming or anything like that. Is there some out there? I'm sure there is. I'm not going to deny that. But that does not make all of them bad. Nina, do you know what Brian did that had him kicked out of high school and had to finish online. Number one, he didn't have to finish online. He chose to finish online because when he got kicked out of the whatever it was, I know it was something like police, the law enforcement, whatever. When he got kicked out of it, they sent him over to the HVAC, where no girls could be. And in the research that I've done, and I have done as probably as deep of a dive into Brian Koberger that anybody could possibly do, I feel like I could sit down with him and say, Koberger, do you remember September the 14th when you did this in 2011? I mean, and I believe that with his mentality, watching his dad, because, his dad was a janitor. And I think that, in my opinion, and based on my research, it caused some problems between him and his father because that wasn't as reputable of a job as maybe the three ladies in the house wanted or demanded. I'll just say and put it that way. And all this is in my opinion. And this is in no way disrespecting the family. Y'all, if you're honest with yourselves, when Jeffrey Dahmer was sitting in the defendant's chair, I'm sure y'all wanted to know about the family to find out what made Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, the only person I have in the defendant's chair is Koberger, so I want to know what made Koberger. It's no different. And the other thing is I'll say is if everybody's going to take up for Koberger and give him the right to face their accusers and all this, then we need some bleachers for all these poor people out there that have been thrown out there and they need to face their accusers. But instead of having a chair, we have to get bleachers from them because there's been they've thrown so many spaghetti noodles up against the wall. I think they've got everybody involved. So, and that's all I'll say about that. I don't want to get on a tangent. So any questions or anything? Now, if y'all, I have videos and everything that, like, at Othram's lab, it's demonstrating how it's done and stuff like that. If y'all are interested in that, if you're interested in Othram's credentials or when they got ISO certified and all that, I've got all that. But I didn't want to, like, bombard y'all with all that. I just wanted to put it out there, the facts. Dahmer picked up roadkill. Yes, he sure did. He absolutely sure did. That poor jogger. I mean, I guess he wishes he hadn't gone jogging there. But you know, and the thing about it is, if you really get psychological about it, Jeffrey Dahmer just wanted to keep him from leaving him, and that's if you think about it, that's really sad. You know. Now, am I going to say, "Oh, poor pitiful him"? I can't. He's dead. But uh, but we always have to remember that they are broken. I mean, I don't think, if I really thought about it, I can't say, or at least I hope, that nobody does something like this just for the hell of it. I have to believe in my heart that they're broken and hurt people, kill people. It's supposed to be hurt people, but I feel like chewing my gum. Exactly. Y'all hear my dog, he's wanting outside. How about this? I'm going to play y'all a song and I'm going to go walk my dogs, if you don't mind. And I'll be back in by the time the song's over. Okay?
up his guitar, strings singing sweet, notes of grace rising, lifting hearts from the street. He's a believer, faith burning bright, trusting in the Lord to guide him through the night. With every chord, he's sharing love, pointing souls to the heavens above. Oh, Jeff the guitarist, strumming for the king. Jeff the believer, let your spirit sing. Husband and friend, with a heart so true, praying for others. Jeff, the world needs you. As a husband, he's steady, a rock by her side, loving like Jesus, with arms open wide. As a friend, he's there when the shadows fall, listening, laughing, answering the call. With wisdom rooted in the word, he lives. He speaks from the heart, and his counsel gives. Oh, Jeff the guitarist, strumming for the king. Jeff the believer, let your spirit sing. Husband and friend, with a heart so true, praying for others. Jeff, the world needs you. On his knees, he's praying for the lost and the broken, speaking God's truth, every word he's spoken. Christian advice, like a beacon in the storm. Jeff's love for others keeps the fire warm. Oh, Jeff the guitarist, strumming for the king. Jeff the believer, let your spirit sing. Husband and friend, with a heart so true.
Okay. They're still outside, but I'm back. Oh, wait a minute. Well, I was talking, but I don't know if y'all. Okay. I'm back. They're still outside, so I may have to leave for a second, but all I got to do is let them in. So let's see. I see a little comment down there from Sunflower, and it says, Nina, have you done a live that goes over all the background info you researched and found on BK? I'd love to check it out. If so, whoa. I have a video, I have several videos talking about ego depletion and threatened egotism, and those are concerning Xana and Ashley Flugel. So I have 3 of those. I have one called Phototype, and I have 2 that are the 8th Amendment, talking about his psychological and everything I found psychologically. And I think it talks about Emily Coral, Ashley Flugel, Nicole Murray, Melissa Koberger, Xana, and Amanda Montana. I think it talks about them. It also talks about him being in the hospital at Brandywine for the eating disorder. It talks about his obsession with candida overgrowth and toxins in his body. It talks about the Kaufman diet. So I've got all those. I'm afraid that if I tried to do a live, that it would bore people to death. That's the reason I haven't done one. So if y'all would like for me to, I can. I mean, but I don't want to do it if y'all are going to be bored. And Kel says, out of curiosity, where are BK's something, because that little heart's sitting there and I can't see it. Now, they live separately from the parents. No, they do not. They both live with the parents. And that is, I sort of get struck out at when I discuss the family. And I don't mean any disrespect to it. It's oddities that I have found, that you have 3 grown children, all 3 in their 30s. All 3 have graduated with majors in psychology. All 3 are innocent. I mean, innocent. All 3 are single, with no mention of boyfriend, girlfriend, and all 3 have no children. So no children, no significant other. All of them major in psychology, and the 2 sisters now live at home. So exactly. I mean, because Amanda's the oldest, and she would be around 37. Then you've got Melissa as the middle, so she would be 34, maybe 35. And then, of course, Brian, which is 30. I would watch that live. Yeah, I mean, the videos are out there, and a lot of them you can tell that it was when I was just learning how to do videos and stuff. And my original platform came from TikTok, so I knew how to make TikTok videos. So um, since I didn't know how to share things on a live or a video or anything like that, the receipts that I have, like the receipts talking about his, the mental stuff and stuff like that. I mean, y'all, I went as far as writing an email to Roy Baumeister. And Roy Baumeister is like this world renowned psychologist. And most of his writings are on ego depletion, threatened egotism, um, surviving the self, you know, um, and stuff like that. And talking about what ending your life, how it harms you. And I'm like, what? So anyway, I actually wrote him an email, and I was like, this is the research I've done. This is what I think happened. And I need to know if I'm completely crazy. And I couldn't believe it, but he actually wrote me back. And so I have that email. I actually have an email from the the Washington State U.S. Attorney, because I wrote them an email, and they wrote me back telling me that, well, pretty much confirming that my thoughts of no Aryan Brotherhood and no retaliation and no confidential informant and no drugs were involved in Idaho 4, that the Aryan Brotherhood clan that went down for all the drugs has nothing to do with Idaho 4. I have that. I can put it on my community post, I don't mind contacting anybody. All they can do is ignore me or tell me no. So that's what I did. So, well, I am pretty proud of this live. I think this was a legitimate live, y'all. I think I may be growing up. So I thank y'all so much. Just because I do it every night, I'm probably going to do a late night live. Something don't sound right. Heart in the way, that clan. Yes, they're very clandestine. Very clandestine. Now, one of the things that I will say is I don't have family, okay? I mean, due to my past, due to my mother not liking me and all this sad stuff and all this, but I don't have family. But I can tell you that if my son was up on a quadruple murder charge, I would probably call my brother and say, hey, just wanted to let you know. And the aunt in Vegas, they found out from the news. No, I mean, the family didn't call and tell the other family, hey, guess what happened to Coburger? They found out on the news. So I thought that was really odd. Then the four brothers in Vegas, the ones that aren't Coburgers, because the aunt got married and gave up her maiden name and took on her husband's name. That's the reason they're not a Coburger. Well, one of them died in 2020. And Amanda's in the obituary. Melissa's in the obituary. Mom Coburger's in the obituary. And Dad Coburger's in the obituary. But Coburger's not in the obituary. He didn't make it. Ah, thank you. I sure do appreciate that. Yeah, I really do appreciate it. I mean, I don't, I mean, I want to make sure that when I do this, that, I do it, I don't look like an idiot. And so I know that a lot of people are getting ready to go live, and that's one thing that I try not to do. Not that, not that somebody, it's not that I think that I could take people away from there. It's out of respect for it's out of respect for y'all, because I don't want y'all saying, oh, well, Nina's live or this one's live and this one's live, and I follow them all. And, you have to pick and choose. And then out of respect for the people I care about, I don't usually go live while they're live. So that's how I usually end up on the late night shift. Left out of the obituary, yes. And y'all let me know if y'all want to know everything I researched on Coburger. I'll be glad to share it. I mean, it's based, my research on Coburger is guided by him. It's guided by what he studied in school. It's guided by his addiction. It's guided by weight loss. It's guided by, he studied Darwinism. He studied Sigmund Freud. I'm 56 years old. I have read thousands of pages of Sigmund Freud. Never thought I would. So it's guided by him. I didn't have an agenda. I didn't set out to research it my way. I researched it his way. So I wonder if they removed him afterwards. Oh, you know what? That's a good point, Kai. I hadn't even thought about that. Wow. That they could have removed him. You think? What y'all think? So anyway, I hope y'all have enjoyed the songs. I love to write, but that's, you can tell by all the songs, they're not my voices, they're not my music. So um I don't know if I have another one or not. I may. If I do, I will leave y'all with that. And I appreciate y'all. So let's see if we have another song.
Smiles that shine yet hide the scars. A soul held captive, dreaming far. A tear will never touch my face. I've learned to wear this empty grace, yearning for a place in the crowd. Whispers echo hope aloud. I walk this line, an unseen thread between the living and the dead. Memories that haunt and chase. In every smile, there's a trace. Words that need to breathe. Silent rooms where feelings weave. Late at night when shadows creep, I drown in thoughts too deep to keep.